Call the meeting to order. Good afternoon. I call this hearing to order. A quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Before we proceed, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items for our remote hearing. First, if you're experiencing connectivity issues, please make sure you or your staff contact our designated technical support so those issues can be resolved immediately. Members participating remotely must continue to use the video function for the duration of their participation in this hearing, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. It is the committee and subcommittee policy that members will remain muted when not recognized, just like turning your microphone on and off during an in-person hearing. This is out of courtesy to all members on the subcommittee, and so that background noise does not interfere with another member who is recognized to speak. When you are recognized, you will need to unmute your microphone and pause for a couple of seconds before speaking so that we will be able to hear everything you say. In order to ensure everything members say is captured on live stream of this hearing, I ask that members pause for 2 to 3 seconds before beginning to speak. If you wish to have a document inserted into the record, please ask for unanimous consent and have your staff email the document to veteranaffairs.hearings@mail.house.gov. It will be uploaded to the committee document repository. Without objection, members will be recognized in order of the subcommittee seniority for questioning witnesses today. This will make it easier for me to ensure all members participating have an opportunity to be recognized. Does any member have a question about the procedures for this hearing? Hearing none, we shall proceed. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. This afternoon, the subcommittee will be reviewing the Department of Veterans Affairs cybersecurity posture. We will also be reviewing the findings in Annual Federal Information Security Modernization Act, or Fisma, audit. Our goal here today is to assess how VA manages its cybersecurity program, including its cyber supply chain, how it controls access to the confidential data, and how well it safeguards its information technology assets. At today's hearing, we will hear from VA leadership about the broader cybersecurity landscape, the challenges, management's approach to tackling these challenges, and what resources may be needed. Last Congress, the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization held the committee's first ever hearing to examine VA's cybersecurity. I am pleased that we can continue this important work and explore the ongoing cybersecurity management challenges at VA. Cybersecurity is not a new challenge in federal government. The threats to our information systems have only increased since the Federal Information Security Management Act was first passed in 2002. Major cybersecurity breaches earlier this year, especially of SolarWinds, the Orin software, the zero-day exchange server hack, and other instances highlight the risk to our information systems. As our reliance on electronic personal data increases and the sharing of data increases, so do the risks. Our dependence on electronic systems to supply healthcare, e-commerce, and public service delivery is growing, all the more so during the pandemic as government and industry shifted life online. We need only to look back a few weeks to see how dangerous a cyber incident can be. The recent ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline crippled fuel supplies up and down the East Coast, adding unnecessary uncertainty and increased costs for countless individuals. Unfortunately, the health sector is not immune to these attacks. In 2017, WannaCry ransomware created by hackers working for the North Korean government spread across the world and infected the UK's national health system. In May 2020, Blackbaud, a cloud software provider used by many healthcare companies, was the victim of ransomware attack. So far, more than 6 million individuals have been impacted. Many experts estimate that we value the medical records on the darknet is higher than that of password and credit cards. According to the security company Comparitech, in 2020, at least 92 individual ransomware attacks affected more than 600 separate clinics, hospitals, and organizations and over 18 million individuals' patient records. Ransomware attacks may have contributed to over 40,056 hours or 1,669 days of downtime to healthcare organizations in 2020. The average time lost to downtime is increasing, up to 21 days during Q4 of 2020. On average, healthcare cyber attacks cost $1.4 million in recovery. VA prides itself as being the nation's largest integrated healthcare provider. In that role, VA should be at the forefront of addressing many of these risks and should be a leader in healthcare cybersecurity. As VA continues the process of modernizing its IT systems to deliver healthcare, adjudicate disability claims, and provide educational benefits, information security management should be a key component from the onset. The subcommittee is still concerned that VA has not done enough to assess risks and develop long-term information security strategies. Numerous Inspector General and Governmental Accountability Office reports continue to cite management failures and lack of internal oversight. They also repeat recommendations year after year, seemingly without adequate progress in resolving them. I look forward to the hearing from leadership within VA's Office of Information Technology about the department's overall cyber program and cyber strategy. We will also hear from the Office of the Inspector General about its recent Fisma audit, outstanding issues, and how VA's cybersecurity posture has evolved over the last several years. Finally, we will hear from the Congressional Research Service, whose expertise can help us contextualize some of these issues and understand cybersecurity within the federal government. As Technology Modernization Subcommittee, we must ask, is VA ready? Is VA's information security management system up to the task? Is VA ready to prioritize cybersecurity? American veterans should be able to access VA healthcare with the peace of mind that their data and privacy will be protected. I hope VA can get this right. I thank the witnesses for being here, and I look forward to their testimony. I would now like to recognize my colleague, Ranking Member Rosendale, to deliver opening remarks he may have. Mr. Rosendale. Ranking Member Rosendale, for a reason we do not have sound. Try it again. Please try again.
Do we have sound?
We have sound, sir.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and address the panel today. And thank you for convening. Over the last decade, the Department of Veterans Affairs roughly doubled in budget and staff. Along with this growth has come a massive increase in the size and vulnerability of VA's networks. Today, VA is responsible for securing networks serving thousands of facilities, hundreds of thousands of end users, and millions of devices. There are trillions of cybersecurity events every month to monitor, and over 7,500 terabytes of data are whizzing around. VA has a crucial mission to provide timely benefits and high-quality health care to our veterans. I know significant information technology requirements go along with that. However, I don't think the department's IT capabilities have kept pace with the growth everywhere else. I do not measure results in the terms of dollars that are spent. I measure results in terms of outcomes. But that being said, the budget for the Office of Information and Technology has been flat for years, while the rest of VA ballooned. Every new employee hired, Every new program created and every new facility built means more devices, software, and networks that have to be served. We can see from the Federal Information Security Modernization Act, Fisma, audit, that cybersecurity is not keeping pace. Vulnerabilities are everywhere. Some of them are simple. Weak passwords, security logs not being maintained, accounts not being deactivated when employees leave, security patches not being installed. Some of them are complicated. Medical devices are not being segmented appropriately. The inventory of known security vulnerabilities is incomplete. Systems are granted authority to operate without assessments of their security controls. What is as troubling as the fact that these exact same issues and problems have been identified year after year for as much as 10 years now. It all adds up to trouble. This audit is not just a compliance exercise. We have seen the consequences in the real world. In the spring of 2020, a group of cyber criminals exploited weak business practices at the VA Financial Services Center to reroute payments meant for healthcare providers. Several $million of taxpayers' money was stolen and directed to foreign criminals. They manipulated a web-based system that had been put online barely a month earlier with shoddy security practices right under the nose of the Office of Information and Technology. The system was taken offline, and rightfully so. All payment inquiries were converted to email and phone calls for several months while the system was secured. Then came the SolarWinds hack. It's been called the largest and most sophisticated cyber attack ever. Hackers working for Russian foreign intelligence inserted malware and SolarWinds software update. This impacted thousands of companies and government agencies. Although the VA was running the compromised software, they claimed no data was stolen. I hope you will excuse me if I have difficulty believing that. Nonetheless, VA had to turn off the SolarWinds software and limit its network monitoring for almost 5 months to clean up the breach. What happened during that 5-month period? What do these two attacks have in common? The financial services incident was inexcusable. The SolarWinds attack was unavoidable, but VA took far too long to recover from both of them. The alarms have been sounding for years. VA claims to be concentrating on preventing cyber attacks, but has achieved mixed results at best. There is much less emphasis on mitigation and recovery. Both areas are important. As the VA's capabilities mature in those areas, particularly given the millions of vital veteran records being managed, I am pleased OIT has commissioned a comparative analysis by Liberty IT, which recommended implementing an upgraded and modernized data loss prevention program. I understand data loss prevention is no simple task. VA's program must not only successfully detect potential data breaches and data exfiltration, but also continuously monitor the data breaches of sensitive data, whether it is in a use at an endpoint, in motion via network traffic, or at rest. Year after year, the Fisma audit identifies many of the same vulnerabilities that must be closed. I hope this VA cybersecurity team will be the group that finally accomplishes that. But as the VA networks grow larger and more complicated, defending against every single threat will become more difficult. That means response capabilities are important. Without a doubt, this is challenging, but it is the mission in front of us. I want to thank the witnesses for participating in this important conversation. And Mr. Chairman, I see I have exceeded my time. I apologize and I yield back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. We will get through this at one point. As far as
I think it's a plot, Mr. Chair.
There's got to be something between. It's a freshman trick they're playing on us somewhere, right? Somewhere, someone's smiling. But we will roll on. Thank you, Mr. Rosendale. I will now introduce the witnesses we have before the subcommittee today. Mr. Paul Cunningham is the Deputy Assistant Secretary and Chief Information Security Officer for the Department of Veteran Affairs. Mr. Cunningham is accompanied by Mr. Gary Stevens, Deputy Chief Information Security Officer and Executive Director for Information Security Policy and Strategy. Ms. Martha Orr, Deputy Chief Information Officer, Quality Performance and Risk, and Ms. LaWanda Jones, Deputy Chief Information Officer, Strategic Sourcing in the Office of Information and Technology, and Mr. Michael Bowman, Director of IT and Security Audits Division, Office of Audits and Evaluations, VA Office of Inspector General, and Mr. Chris Jacoran, Analyst in Cybersecurity Policy, Congressional Research Service. We will now hear the prepared statements from our panel members. I'll remind you to please pause for 2 to 3 seconds before speaking so that the recording will capture all of your words, and please remember to do so when answering members' questions. Thank you. Your written statements in full will be included in the hearing record. Without objection, Mr. Cunningham, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Cunningham, you are also muted, sir. You're good to go, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Mervin, Ranking Member Rosendale, and distinguished member of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on the Department of Veterans Affairs Cybersecurity Program and its support to the department's mission of service to the veteran. Today, I'm accompanied with Mr. Gary Stevens, Deputy Chief Information Security Officer and Executive Director of Information Security Policy and Strategy under the Office of Information Technology. Also, Ms. LaWanda Jones, Deputy Chief Information Officer for Strategic Sourcing within OIT, and Ms. Martha Orr, Deputy Chief Information Officer for Quality, Performance, and Risk within OIT. In 2019, I provided this subcommittee with an overview of VA's cybersecurity strategy and an update on the Office of Information Security's effort within the VA cybersecurity program. Since then, significant national and international events have altered how we operate and engage with veterans. Despite this challenging time, the department has remained focused on carrying out its core mission of caring for those who won the battle, and we remain vigilant in the protection of veterans and employee information and VA assets. The coronavirus pandemic has changed the way VA provides its service to veterans, yet it did not alter our approach to cybersecurity. From a cybersecurity perspective, the threat to our network remains the same. Our adversaries are nation-state actors, organized crime organizations, and individuals who have nefarious agendas. Their motives continue to be financial gain, corporate or state-sponsored espionage, or damage to the department's reputation and public trust. However, the pandemic did fuel the adversaries with new content and topics to leverage in their attack. For example, phishing campaigns were disguised as COVID-19 informational updates, enticing users to click on the links, which provide the attacker additional access or downloaded malicious software. Fortunately, our workforce was well trained in identifying these types of attacks, and we had the tools in place for reporting and responding to those threats. The department was also well poised to support COVID-19 response efforts, including expanding the use of telehealth and virtual work environments. As OIT increased network bandwidth and rapidly deployed cloud-based conferencing services, the cybersecurity team ensured veterans' data remained safe and secure. OIT's information security expedited the security review of critical medical technologies, adjusted our risk thresholds based off the operational constraints, and provided security assessments for the enhancement of remote connections to VA networks. Our team's actions allowed VA to continue to provide seamless and uninterrupted delivery of healthcare, services, and benefits to the veteran. The department continues to refine and improve its cybersecurity program with its core tenets defined in Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2014 and supported by the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Cybersecurity Framework and the Risk Management Framework. These foundational frameworks provide cohesive, risk-based approach toward meeting departmental mission objectives. VA's approach empowered cybersecurity personnel to engage with mission, business, and system owners to develop and deploy innovative technologies in a secure and effective manner. The last year has proven that technology will continue to grow as a mission enabler for the department. Veterans have come to expect the same level of access and convenience in their engagement with VA as they experienced in their personal online activities. They also expect their data to remain protected. With the strategies and policies and programs we have in place, the department has risen to that challenge and continues in its mission to protect and secure the information of and services to the veteran. With a balanced risk management approach toward secure computing, we will maintain the confidence and trust of veterans, our stakeholders, and the greater public. In conclusion, I want to thank Congress, and specifically the subcommittee, for your continued interest and shared commitment to the success of VA's mission, including the cybersecurity program. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, a member of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. This concludes my statement, and I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, and thank you for your service. Next, we'd like to have Mr. Bowman. You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
All right, thank you. Chairman Mervan, Ranking Member Rosendale, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Office of Inspector General's oversight of VA's IT security program. My statement focuses on the department's security program objectives and the challenges it faces in protecting the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of VA systems and data. IT systems and network are critical for VA to carry out its mission of providing medical care, a range of benefits and services to millions of veterans and their family. The OIG recognizes and appreciates this is a very complex undertaking. To the extent that VA does not properly manage and secure their IT investments, they can become increasingly vulnerable to intrusions by groups seeking to obtain sensitive information, commit fraud, disrupt operations, or launch attacks against other VA systems. Security failures undermines the trust that veterans put into VA to protect their sensitive information. This can also adversely affect veterans' engagement with VA programs and services. The Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2014, also known as Fisma, requires that agencies develop, document, and implement an agency-wide program for the system and data. For the 21st consecutive year, the OIG has reported to the extent which VA has IT safeguards in place consistent with Fisma requirements. The OIG's conclusion from the Fisma audit are not new. Rather, they're a repeat of many of the same concerns that the VA's IT security program that we've reported in prior years. VA continues to face significant challenges in complying with Fisma requirements. This is due in part to maintaining an aging and outdated IT infrastructure. Our fiscal year 2020 Fisma report, which was released last month, contained 26 recommendations for improving VA's IT security program. Most of these recommendations have been repeated for many years because VA has not adequately addressed our prior IT security concerns. Our findings and recommendations focused in the following areas: configuration management controls. These controls are designed to ensure critical systems have the appropriate security baselines in place and have up-to-date vulnerability patches implemented. During testing, we have consistently seen VA systems have not installed the latest critical security patches. The OIG has concluded that VA systems were not securely configured to mitigate against known and unknown information security vulnerabilities. Identity management access controls. These controls are meant to ensure password standards are consistently implemented and to limit user access privileges to those necessary and only for legitimate purposes. The OIG has seen many examples of VA systems using default usernames and passwords or easily guessed passwords. The use of weak passwords is a well-known security vulnerability that allows malicious users to gain unauthorized access to mission-critical systems. Overall, the OIG's Fisma audit, in addition to other reports on VA's IT security program, shows that VA has considerable work to do in order to achieve better IT security outcomes. VA's fundamental mission of providing benefits and services to veterans is dependent on deploying secure IT systems and networks. Until processes are in place to ensure adequate IT controls are deployed across the enterprise, VA mission-critical systems and sensitive veteran data will remain at risk. While VA has made some recent improvements in information management, considerable challenges remain. We believe that VA's successful implementation of our Fisma recommendations is vital in its effort to achieve ongoing and address emerging IT security risks. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. I would be happy to answer any questions that you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Jai Karan. You are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chair Mervan, Ranking Member Rosendale, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Chris Jai Grant. I am an analyst in cybersecurity policy at the Congressional Research Service, with a focus on national cybersecurity policy and federal agency cybersecurity. I have been in this role at CRS since 2015. CRS provides Congress with analysis that is authoritative, confidential, objective, and nonpartisan. Any arguments presented in my testimony are for the purposes of informing Congress, not to advocate for a particular policy outcome. I have submitted my written testimony for the record. It addresses the principles of risk management agencies consider when developing cybersecurity programs, federal agencies and policies involved with the Department of Veterans Affairs cybersecurity, and options for Congress. During my oral statement, I will discuss VA's unique challenges and options Congress has to address them. VA has unique challenges when it comes to ensuring its cybersecurity. The department has a customer base of over 9 million veterans and their families. It operates over 5,000 facilities nationwide and must protect an array of information technology or IT devices, from laptops to blood pressure monitors. In protecting this equipment, VA, like all federal agencies, engage in a cybersecurity risk management process. Prior to purchasing a cybersecurity tool or implementing a new process, agencies must first understand what data and systems they possess, how that data and those systems may be attacked, and how likely those attacks are, and what challenges the agencies may face if the data and systems are impaired. This assessment helps to ensure that agencies take proactive approaches to cybersecurity in a resource-limited environment. VA requested $113.1 billion in discretionary funding for fiscal year 2022. Using past year's calculations, this may equate to an estimate of around $650 million for cybersecurity funding, should Congress continue the trend of enacting around 0.57% for cybersecurity funding as a percentage of discretionary funding, and if that trend continues. Relative to other agencies, VA spends more on cybersecurity. This is expected as the VA has the second largest agency budget behind the Department of Defense. As a percentage of overall budget, VA spends slightly less, even when discounting agencies with a significant cybersecurity expenditures for national cybersecurity missions. Congress may choose to direct VA to change its cybersecurity spending. Congress may choose to direct VA to pursue the use of shared services. The Government Accountability Office and the Inspector General have highlighted shortcomings in VA's management of IT systems. While the responsibility to manage the IT risks of an agency ultimately lie with the agency heads and their designees, an agency may lack the expertise to assess its IT risk, appropriate IT security solutions, and have the funding necessary to address those risks. One way to address this issue is to shift the is to shift the provisioning of cybersecurity services from VA to another agency. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, part of the Department of Homeland Security, may provision technical capabilities for VA, such as Domain Name Services Resolution or DNS Resolution, Security Operations Center Services, and the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. Congress may choose to accelerate plans for VA to move toward next-generation cybersecurity services, such as endpoint detection and response technology, penetration testing services, and zero-trust architecture. In examining this option, Congress may choose to create statutory requirements for VA, reports to Congress on their adoption, or provide explicit resources to support their adoption. Congress may also target specific systems for next-generation cybersecurity services adoption, such as those related to the electronic health records or financial management systems. Congress has required VA to implement cybersecurity requirements in addition to those broadly applicable to the federal government in the past. For example, the data breach notification requirement in the Veterans Affairs Information Security Act is in addition to the data loss notification requirements in Fisma and the Privacy Act of 1974. In closing, VA has unique attributes to its mission and IT enterprise, which complicates its efforts for cybersecurity. However, there are established policies and programs in place to assist with implementing a successful cybersecurity program, and Congress has options to accelerate cybersecurity at VA. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jaikaran, for your testimony. At this time, I will recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Cunningham, how would you grade VA's progress regarding its cybersecurity program?
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity to ask that. I think VA is on par or slightly above par with the rest of the federal space. I work with the Department of Energy, and my discussions with other CISOs, I find that the challenges that we see are equally shared across the federal space. Although the type of information that we're protecting is a little bit of a challenge, a little bit different from my counterparts. I do find that we do suffer from the same set of challenges. Sorry, I lost your feed.
There you go.
How are you, sir? Over the last several years, the Office of Inspector General, the OIG, and the Government Accountability Office have identified a number of areas where VA cybersecurity remains deficient. Mr. Cunningham, can you identify the specific information security areas where VA leadership has been able to make progress? And what, if any, program office changes are you planning to make to ensure the proper level of management and oversight of departmental cybersecurity?
So each of the findings from all assessments, to include the IGs, are reviewed with the auditors to look at, one, understand what the risks are, and then to formulate a response strategy. That is conducted through our Office of Quality, Risk, and Performance, Ms. Martha Orr, and I'll ask her to talk about the specifics of those findings. But in that, the second part of your question was about organization. The department has a more centralized risk management approach to cybersecurity, where the CIO is the central part, and then it provides that security and IT capability across the department, with minor exceptions around the medical community that relates to HIPAA, where HVA has as the certified authority under HIPAA, has delegation for responsibilities. So HIPAA compliance is strongly coordinated with VHA through our privacy office in that regard. And then lastly, on our organization, there's the applications that reside on our networks are usually owned by the business owners. Over the last year, I've seen a greater improvement in coordination as well as in development around DevSecOps, where security is being built around each step of the development and in operations. And that's being embraced by our business owners as well. And with that, I'd ask Ms. Orr if you have anything else you would like to add.
I would just add to your response, Mr. Cunningham, that we do work closely with both the Office of Inspector General audit staff as well as GAO to make sure that when we do develop our corrective action plans, we fully understand the recommendation and the areas which are deficient and adjust and make any adjustments to our plan accordingly. And that is an ongoing process that we have to ensure that we are moving forward in a way that will correct the deficiencies noted by those two organizations.
Thank you. Mr. Bowman, the Office of Inspector General annual Fisma audit identified 26 recommendations, 24 of which are repetitions from the previous years. Based on the IG's review of management challenges at VA, how and why has VA struggled to prioritize addressing the findings from past Fisma audits?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I would characterize VA as a large and decentralized organization. It's got at least 400,000 employees, 300,000 contractors. It's got millions of computer endpoints that it has to monitor every day. And because it's so large and decentralized, it's difficult to roll out a security posture across the enterprise. So when we conduct audits, we'll go to the major data centers and we'll perform the same procedures and we can see improvements there. But when we go to VA facilities that we've never visited, we tend to see a different security posture just because it's not monitored in advance of our Fisma audits. So that's, I would say, primarily the reason that VA has a hard time improving in security. It's just large, diverse, and complex.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. My time has expired at this time. Mr. Rosendale, you are recognized for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cunningham, I'm going to start off with you. What's the state of VA's data loss prevention program, and has it been deployed?
Sir, I think early in comments you talked about the department's seeking outside support and contract to come in and develop a long-term strategy. We received that strategy last year. We're in the midst of deploying that strategy with the intent of having IOC within the next 12 months. And it's a multiple elements to DLP, or data loss protection, that goes beyond just technical. There's also the element of training people on how to properly code and also recognize potential sensitive data, making sure it's properly tagged so we can discover it through technology means.
Okay. So can you tell me if there are any gaps in the procurement as it relates to the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act?
As far as so you're asking in acquiring the DLP solutions?
Exactly.
Sir, yes. Currently, there's several acquisition activities going on around DLP. There's several actually that all coincide because, as I mentioned before, it's a little more than just one solution. I'm not aware of a gap. We are looking at funding solutions to support DLP as a priority.
Okay. Is there something, what do you think that we could do to help clear up that process and help expedite this so that we're not leaving ourselves so vulnerable?
Well, certainly the interest of this committee on this topic is going to be helpful as well. I don't see any direct line for the committee as far as from law or regulation that would remove any of the other priorities that we have in play. And again, continued support around funding. But I think that's what you're asking, if there's anything specific you can do. Sure. I'm not aware of anything right now that we can do.
Okay. Let me see. I want to ask this of Mr. Bowman. I'm trying to identify the differences between this testing, if you will, or checks for the audit. In a typical year, it includes the Fisma audit includes your auditors probing the VA's cyber defenses. How sophisticated are the tactics that they utilize for this testing to actual cyber criminals? So if you could put in perspective the testing that's taking place as compared to the tactics that the cyber criminals are using to actually utilize this information. And is this testing comparable to what we would see in the private sector when they are going at and testing their actual protections for cybersecurity?
Yeah, so the tools that we use are credible. They've got a good reputation. We'll use Nmap, we'll use Nessus, we use database scanners and web application vulnerability scanners that are extremely credible. They are very good at identifying high risk and critical vulnerabilities. Probably not as good as identifying zero-day vulnerabilities, just because it takes a while to recognize those. Our tactics are, say, well communicated in advance. VA is aware of our IP addresses. They're aware of the types of scans that we're performing. We're mostly looking at VA's ability to patch and remediate critical and high-risk vulnerabilities and how long it's taking them to complete that patching cycle. Now, if you're talking about an attack from the outside, it's going to be more stealthy. It's going to be an active, persistent threat. And if it gets a foothold in VA, if VA doesn't have its monitoring turned on, its audit loggings turned on, VA is not going to know that its system's been compromised, where our activities are well announced. So that's really the major difference. Our tools are very credible.
So basically, though, what we're dealing with is having an open book test. You let them know, here's what we're checking, and then you go in there and check it. I don't think the cyber criminals use the same tactic.
They're going to use a lot different tactics.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they're not going to be as noisy as we are, that's for sure.
Yeah, okay. And then I've one last, I've lost my time, Mr. Chair. We'll go try and catch it on the next round.
Thank you, Ranking Member Rosendale. At this time, I'd like to recognize Congressman Takano, Chairman Takano.
Thank you, Chairman Mervan. Over the last several years, the committee has heard about VA's challenges regarding hiring well-qualified staff in sufficient numbers, especially in high-tech positions in OIT. Mr. Baumann, in your opinion, are VA's hiring challenges impacting its cybersecurity posture?
I think if you look at the CIO's position and how often VA gets a new CIO to that office, the consequence of that is VA changes its priorities. And so you may have a CIO that focuses on IT security, and then that position turns over and the next CIO might focus on Cerner EHRM implementation. So if you don't have consistent leadership, it's hard to see the initiatives get completed from cradle to grave. So the turnover at the highest positions does have an impact.
But what about this the entire workforce in OIT? Is there an issue of insufficient workforce, or is it more a problem of leadership?
You know, our Fisma really doesn't get much into workforce development, but we have done other work in this area, and we've seen vacancies at leadership positions stay open, stay vacant for years. So that's got to have an impact.
Mr. Jackaran, can you comment from your perspective what goes on across the government? I mean, I know you're not from necessarily VA specific, but would you say that this is a kind of a common issue across government agencies and departments?
Thank you for the question, sir. Yes, I would say that this is a common issue. Each year, in addition to the IG's report to Congress, the Office of Management and Budget is required to submit an annual Fisma report to Congress, which rolls up the snapshots of all federal agencies. Looking at those snapshot pages, we do find some commonalities across federal agencies and their Fisma compliance.
Mr. Cunningham, does VA leadership see a connection in hiring difficulties and the deficient information security posture identified by GAO?
So the department recognizes that across OIT in general, we need a strong workforce. We're working with the department on the manning issues. And in light of that, I mean, I can tell you that we have approximately 6,700 IT specialists, of which about 700 are designated as InfoSec InfoSec specialists. And of those 700, about 250 of them work directly under my office.
Mr. Baumann didn't use the word that I'm using as far as continuity, but I mean, the lack of continuity, the constant change of leadership. Do you agree with the IG in that assessment that that poses a challenge in terms of cybersecurity as a priority?
I think long-term strategies for cybersecurity is always a challenge. It's very dynamic, and then of course leadership does change priorities. Even as recent as last week, we've changed around the executive order and also directions from Congress on what the priorities are. The manning level is very complicated. I think there's a lot more to be unpacked there about what's the right level in federal spaces on cybersecurity people as it relates to budget or number of drops or number of employees. I think there's a lot more that can be done there. I'd like to hear more from the GA or from our other guest if he has more data on what the federal average is on those. I can say that if you're changing your strategy, and I think the objectives of the strategy remain the same, but how we implement those can change, the priorities change, and it makes it difficult for long-term progress to be fully funded and maintain the priority that it has when we initially begin and then in the out years.
Excuse me, Mr. Cunningham, to what degree is turnover at the senior leadership and SCS levels? That's the same as a similar question to contributing to the cybersecurity management challenges. And I think you've kind of answered some of that already.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. It's an effect. Anytime someone comes up with a new strategy, it will influence the strategy, and of course, then it will impact long term how we implement it.
My time is up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm going to yield back. And thank you, Mr. Mervan.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. I recognize myself for 5 more minutes. Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Bowman had spoken to the fact that when there are new facility visits, there are new failures that are identified. My question is, as an enterprise, what is the process to have all failures at all the facilities compliant? How do you learn? How do you translate one failure in one facility to successes going forward?
That's a great question. First, all the findings that are reviewed from the IG are shared. We break them down and then we share them with our larger field offices. We have approximately 400 plus information system security officers out in the field. And we talk about these findings and what other organizations are doing to resolve those. And of course, then we also move those into policy if it's rampant, that we can put in policy to promulgate performance. Again, how these implement are related to humans and to a vast network that we have. It does get complicated to ensure that the zero tolerance level is maintained. We drive every day to drive down those risks, to implement those in a more cohesive fashion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Cunningham or Mr. Stevens. The 2021 VA IG Fisma audit rates VA's information security program as not effective. What is preventing VA from making improvements in its standing on the Fisma audits? What resources does VA need in order to gain ground in this area?
So I'd start, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Stevens. A major contributor of that calculation is around the CAP goals, or the cross-agency priority goals. We're reporting that we completed 7 of the 10. Of those, we've looked at 3 of them that are outstanding, and we've one has to do with the accreditation or authority to operate. There was 7 systems that did not have a current authority to operate. Those have been addressed and resolved. And then we also had a lot of domains. That was the second one, was domains that were va.gov, but they weren't managed by the government, and we're down to 1 of those. So we take those findings and we drive those to completion. And again, the targets of those are 100%. So 1 off, which I believe is a testament to VA of being able to report the transparency that for even 1 off, we will not accept that as 100%. We'll count that as 98. And then with that, Mr. Stevens.
Yes, sir. In order to get in front of that issue as well, we've done a number of proactive things, inclusive of ensuring that our policy is better aligned with the NIST 837-39, so that it further embraces that, as well as aligning with the 1253 standards. So number 1, we're at parity with DoD and how they do those assessments from an EHRM standpoint. But also what that does for us is it gives us a further distillation consistent with those standards, so that we operate based on a common rubric across the federal space. And then with that, we've integrated and designed what is referred to as the knowledge service. The knowledge service is a online repository inclusive of both the policy requirements, a distillation of what's the essence of those policies and what they mean at a more functional and digestible level, and then aligning those also with the implementation guides. Through that effort, we get consistency in implementation to address some of those concerns that Mr. Bowman mentioned earlier. In addition to that, we've also pursued an active engagement with identification of what we've referred to as the Common Security Framework champions. Those champions are designed to assess holistically across the entire enterprise at the category and subcategory level. So we get a perspective on the overall overarching implementation from a holistic standpoint across the VA space. And then based upon that, we're able to identify where there's deltas in what we believe we should be at and what we desire to be with, and then take proactive means in order to identify the set of things that we want to do corporately to address those gaps. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Cunningham, I'm concerned about some of what I saw in VA's budgetary submissions to Congress earlier this year, and the topic that was discussed by Mr. Jaikaran. VA's 2021 budget request was $460 million for information security, which equated to 44% of 0.44% of discretionary budget. That is the lowest percentage in the last 5 years, and a reduction of $65 million from the 2020 enacted budget. How much do you anticipate will have gone to cybersecurity, including all supplemental funding for fiscal year 2021?
For 2021, I'd have to go back for the record to get you the exact number, but my rough estimate of cybersecurity, I want to say, is roughly about $300 million in that, rolled up with the supplemental.
And then I just have one more question for right now. How can VA justify a 2021 budget request where information security is the lowest percentage of discretionary funding in over half a decade?
Sir, that's a difficult question to answer. I'll have to bring that back to the record. I agree that we have to invest in IT. Legacy systems are probably the biggest risks that we have. I'll bring it back for the record.
And what is VA's approach to the fiscal year 2022 budget request for information security funding? Has there been an impact due to supplemental funding for the pandemic response?
From a cybersecurity perspective, we've been able to leverage some of the supplementals as we moved cybersecurity activities to assist in the COVID response, especially when it comes to remote environments and as well as telehealth.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member. Okay, so I apologize. I'm going to have another round of 5 minutes of questions. Mr. Jaikaran, strategically, how would you compare VA cybersecurity spending and resource allocation with the rest of the federal government?
Looking at strategically, my written statement for the record has a table A1 that looks at the percentages that agencies are spending as a relation of their base discretionary budget. So that does not account for supplementals or emergency funding, but the base discretionary budget that OMB reports as part of the president's budget. Few agencies top 1% of their spending for cybersecurity. Those that do have a significant national cybersecurity mission, such as the Department of Homeland Security. Most agencies are below 1%. However, even the agencies that are below 1% are spending closer to 0.25% on cybersecurity for protecting the agency's internal networks, as opposed to the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is spending closer to 0.5%.
Following up on the ranking member's question, can you speak to the limitations of the Fisma audit and how it compares to the industry cybersecurity audits? Mr. Jaikaran.
Thank you for the question, sir. So the Fisma audit is unique in the sense that it is governed by a series of special publications that the National Institute of Standards and Technology puts out in guidance that the Office of Management and Budget releases to agencies each year. So agencies know the documents they will be compared against, and agencies know the standards that OMB is looking for. That sense of knowing what an audit is going to look for is repeated throughout industry. So if you look at the SOC 2, or you look at the COBIT, or the ISO 2700 family of information security standards, those are published and organizations know what they would be compared against to. So in this sense, the federal government has followed the operations of industry.
Thank you very much, sir. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Rosendale. Are you prepared to ask your next follow-up question? Okay. We will be waiting for Mr. Rosendale. At this time, Mr. Bowman, in preparing the audit, did the OIG notice any trends or general patterns in VA cybersecurity posture?
So typically, when we conduct the Fisma audit every year, we focus on a consistent group of controls. We'll look at access controls, configuration management, service continuity, security management. We're looking at the same set of controls every year. And as we indicated in the statement, we have repeat findings and recommendations. That is the pattern. Most of those recommendations have been ongoing for more than 10 years. So we would expect to see more than incremental improvement over time. If VA focuses on the access control issues and configuration management control issues, that would go a long ways towards removing the material weakness.
Thank you. For Mr. Cunningham and Mr. Stevens, the Fisma audit noted deficiencies in the implementation and application of the Enterprise Risk Management Program. How would you describe the deficiencies in implementation and application of the Risk Management Program?
So I look at we looked at our policy. We made sure that it mapped back to the Fisma standards. We also mapped it back to the NIST risk management framework under NIST Special 837 and 39. And we're actually looking at each of the 8 elements in Fisma 2014 of the cybersecurity program. We're looking through those lenses to improve our understanding of risk from an organization, mission, and system level. That's been a standard discussion in cybersecurity for the last 2 years that I've been here, and it's been being implemented inside my organization as well as across OIT. So I look at it that, from a risk management perspective, we have the tools in place. We have the people that are knowledgeable on the controls, and to balance the risk to the mission where it's appropriate. With that, we can also turn it over to Mr. Stevens if he has additional comments about the risk management approach.
Yes, sir. What I would say is that in addition to what Mr. Cunningham mentioned, we're also working directly with our QPR team, Ms. Martha Orr, so that we're able to identify common risk indicators as it relates to the way in which we execute our roles and functions, and as we assess our controls and their configuration and their status, so that we get more of a holistic understanding of that ARM, of that risk management framework and the implementation holistically, so that we're also driving towards the scenario where we're able to assess our posture at a corporate level based upon critical risk indicators.
Thank you. Mr. Bowman, would OIG agree with Mr. Cunningham's characterizations? Why or why not?
As I've said previously, the VA enterprise is a large, decentralized, complex organization. It's very difficult to roll out a consistent security posture across the enterprise. I wouldn't disagree with anything that Mr. Cunningham has said. It just proves that implementation is more difficult than developing policy.
Thank you. Mr. Cunningham, does VA have a plan for implementing the 26 recommendations that the IG identified in this year's Fisma's audit? Can you provide it to the committee?
We do have a plan and we can provide it to the committee.
Okay. What is the timeline for the completion of that plan?
Each the findings have a different timeline due to the complexity. We'll ask Ms. Orr if she wants to give the roll up on the timeline.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cunningham. Yes, each of the recommendations has a plan of actions and milestones, and that speaks to the mitigation strategy to correct the deficiency, and each has a date. I believe the dates do go out for several years at this point, 2 or 3. They will be, though, noted in the documentation that we provide to you with the corrective action plan.
Thank you. Who's accountable for the accountable official at VA if the department continues to fail to implement the recommendations or improve its cybersecurity posture?
If you read Fisma 2014, the secretary is ultimately responsible, and that's delegated to the CIO, who designates it to the security officer, myself.
The Government Accountability Office has recommended that VA take several steps, including developing a cybersecurity risk management strategy to improve department-wide cybersecurity. What are the specific actions the department has taken in response to the GAO's 4 priority recommendations?
I don't have that in front of me. We address all findings through our QPR process. Ms. Orr, do you have specifics on those 4?
I am sure that I do have specifics on those 4. I just don't have them at hand. So if I could please take that for the record, and I would be happy to provide the responses that we did give to GAO.
When do you anticipate finalizing these steps?
Again, those recommendations would have a date that we committed to finalize the steps, and it will be part of the response.
Thank you, Ms. Orr. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Rosendale.
Mr. Chair, we back live again. The tomfoolery is over. The committee's functioning. Mr. Cunningham, how does the department assess technology risk, and how are the decisions you and your team are making on those risks conveyed to the secretary?
Thank you. Systems are assessed when they're brought online, and then through a normal reoccurring periodicity based off the risk of the system. Those findings are shared with the authorizing official, and it's the authorizing official's decision of the risk based off a policy on whether they can handle whether that system continues to operate or not. Those risks are then brought up to the CIO and myself if there's a significant issue with the system that needs to be brought down, or if there's a choice to operate outside those parameters, that's also brought up. From that, we also have ongoing scanning for vulnerabilities, the same scanning tools that are used by IG. We use the latest indicators of compromise provided by the Department of Homeland Security. And in that, when we find vulnerabilities, we notify those to the system owner and the information security system information system security officer assigned to that system for remediation. If there's an issue on that, they can't make POA&M, that's been brought up and it's tracked. And it's, again, we look at how many of our systems are slipping or how much we're carrying that additional risk. And that's reported up to the CIO through various means, whether it's governance councils or weekly reports.
So who establishes the priority of these deficiencies? Okay, so we continue to see, as the reports show, that we've got 20 of these issues that continue to show up for 10 years, time and time and time again. Okay, so what I'm trying to figure out is who establishes the priority of those issues and which ones are to address at what time?
So that, again, will be coordinated through operations, myself, and quality performance review, Ms. Orr.
Okay. Mr. Jike Grant, I would like to ask you a little bit more of a subjective, I hate to say, question, but what I'm trying to determine is what's your level of concern of the access to any foreign party, okay, to the all of this information, okay, from the VA, and the additional risk that it poses if they can start puzzling together DOD, VA, taking all that information. And it's our understanding that there was a lot of different agencies that their data was breached, okay? And the risk that it poses to our service members, whether they're active or in a veteran status, okay, both financially and physically.
Thank you for the question, sir. As we think about the threats that foreign adversaries may pose to American citizens, it's important to think about which adversary we're referring to. If we're talking about a highly sophisticated nation state like Russia, they may have a certain set of motives about identifying potential targets for espionage. If we're talking about China, they have the same purpose. However, if that foreign adversary is a criminal organization, they may be seeking to use information related to the protected health information or the personally identifiable information about a veteran or a service member or their families in order to spearfish them or otherwise fool them into installing malware on their computer and taking advantage of their finances or other protected and sensitive information about them. So it's important to think about not just foreign adversaries, but the type of adversary and what they may seek to do with specific types of information.
So, and that all being said, I guess the crux of my question is what level of concern do you have that all of these parties are doing exactly that, and just how much risk our members are at?
Based on publicly available information, it is difficult to draw a strong conclusion on the level of concern. A few weeks ago, the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, testified before Congress as part of the worldwide threat assessment of the intelligence community and did highlight the cybersecurity risks. So we do know that we have foreign adversaries that are seeking to take advantage of American citizens and their data, and that should, at a binary decision, cause concern and a response from both government and industry to stymie their ability to take advantage of Americans and their citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I see that I'm out of time again. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Rosendale. Mr. Jayakaran, how can you how can we best provide agency CIOs and leadership with useful immediate information that will help them manage and address cybersecurity threats and risks?
Thank you for the question, sir. There are a couple of proposals that could help with that. So one is to think about how agencies assess risk to their own networks and try to provide agencies useful information that they can use across agencies to assess that risk. A couple of proposals there have been for the Department of Homeland Security to do so. Additionally, there are actions in the most recent Executive Order 14028 that the Biden administration released, I believe it was just last week, directing DHS, OMB, and other agencies to both work with vendors so that vendors are providing information to the government and for the government to be able to better assess threats from that information and provide that out. So one way is to improve the information that agencies are receiving so that they can then internalize that risk. Once an agency internalizes that risk, they still need to know what to do about it. So another proposal has been for other agencies to provide better baselines for how agencies can mitigate risk. Proposals there have gone with the Department of Homeland Security, CISA specifically, also with NIST, who produces the special publications providing guidance to agencies on how they manage their cybersecurity programs.
Mr. Cunningham or Mr. Stevens, same question. How can we best provide agency CIOs and leadership with useful, immediate information that will help them manage and address cybersecurity threats and risks?
I think a lot's already being done, especially around the Federal CIO and CISO Council. Over the last 5 years, I've seen that group continue to provide resources and the network and the relationships to share information. Again, I think the work that CISA, DHS CISA is doing is incredible. The ability to share information, indicators of compromise, the partnerships that are established have really worked out a lot. And then again, the intelligence community, the work that they're providing and their sharing of information and indicators for us so we can work on our own penetration teams and our threat hunting teams to identify potential malicious activity on our networks. So those things are already in place, and we just need more of that support to keep that going.
How would you envision improvements to the interagency cooperation such that risks and threats are communicated across the federal government?
There's been a lot of work on that already, but more needs to be done. We want to be able to get to automated indicator sharing, where we've seen in other departments where one site can recognize an indicator of compromise, write a code, and it's automatically deployed across the country. Those sort of activities, things that are found in national labs, we need to start thinking a little bit more forward thinking. The VA has partnered with Oak Ridge National Laboratory under Department of Energy, and we're looking at those sort of ways to, how we protect we use that information at Oak Ridge National Laboratory for research and development, but I work closely with Department of Energy and Oak Ridge National Laboratory about securing networks, and we talk about ways we can share information.
What additional resources and or intelligence would you like to receive?
The most difficult part of receiving classified intelligence is getting it declassified in a timely manner that's actionable to the field. And that's where I think the biggest challenge is today.
Have you identified additional needs given the operational dependencies you have with the Department of Defense?
We actually do. We work very closely with the Department of Defense through DHA. We share the ATO responsibilities of our networks. They are able to, we use the same EMAS program. That's a joint DoD-VA developed solution. So we are in that regard transparent in sharing information. We rely on their analysts as well as our analysts to protect those networks.
At this time, I'm going to Mr. Rosendale. I'll yield 5 minutes for questions for yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cunningham, how can you be certain that no data was stolen in the SolarWinds hack?
I'm very confident in that. One, the malware was downloaded because it was vendor signed. We didn't know as the vendor didn't know the malware was there, neither did we. This automated patch management program is a best practice across federal agencies. Within 12 hours, we were able to bring down all SolarWinds instances so they weren't on the network as precautionary to meet the executive direct or the emergency directive put out by DHS. So that means that period of time that we recognized that we had a problem, and the time we were able to bring it down in 12 hours across this complex environment is really a testament to VA's capability from an operational perspective. So we looked through all of our records. First of all, we installed all the indicators of compromise. We replayed our net flow data looking for any other indicators that showed that this might have happened in the past, to identify that maybe an attacker used those indicators before we received them. There was no evidence of that. We then asked DHS to come in and look at our systems, and they did, and they found nothing. We asked the intelligence community to come in, and they said that they would come back to us if they saw anything, is how they put it, and they didn't come back. We also commissioned a third party to come in and look at our systems as well, and it was Microsoft, and they came through and they looked through all of our efforts, and they agreed that there was no indicators that would show that any information, first of all, that the malware was activated or that it was used in a way to move data in a nefarious way.
So Homeland Security, after their review, they never really responded, gave you a written response that they did not find anything. They just didn't report back. Homeland Security did. The intelligence community, and they'll come and they'll look from different perspectives. They don't always share their approach for multitude of reasons. And again, they did not come back with a confirm or deny, they didn't come back with a clear written statement. But they would. They have in the past. They're very quick to tell us if there's something there. So if no data was stolen, the consequences of the SolarWinds cyber attack was the VA lost capability to monitor its networks while SolarWinds software was taken offline. What vulnerabilities did that create, and how do you prevent the additional hacks? Well, SolarWinds provides numerous capabilities, but they're also, we have an overlap. We have other tools in place that were able to be leveraged to cover the gap. The biggest issue was loss in operational monitoring to detect before it fails or immediately when it fails, so we can make sure that it doesn't impact VA's ability to provide services. Again, it was a choice made to be slow and methodical about returning those systems back in coordination with DHS and following their guidelines. So that's what we did. And I looked at it from a standpoint that we were able to minimize the risk from an operational perspective, as well as a security perspective, by leveraging the other tools that we had in our arsenal as we protect our network. Okay. Mr. Jaikaran, I don't see him on the screen. Is he still with us?
We believe we may have just lost him for a moment, Ranking Member.
Okay. Well, then my last question was for Mr. Jaikaran. So if I can yield back the balance of that time, Mr. Chair. If he joins us again, maybe I can hit him with one more question.
Thank you, Ranking Member Rosendale. My question is regarding supply chain management. Given VA's massive technology upgrades, proper supply chain security is essential. Ms. Jones, what steps are the department leadership taking to ensure proper oversight of supply chain issues?
Thank you for that question, sir. We have developed a ICTS, that's Information Communications Technology Services Supply Chain Risk Management Strategy. And we're looking at it from a VA holistic perspective. We're also working with our contracting offices to ensure and enforce that we have the prohibitive contract language in our contract templates, to ensure that we're not teaming, our vendors are not teaming with vendors that are either prohibited from doing business or that are suspended.
How have supply chain risks changed over time or because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
So thank you. That's an excellent question as well. You know, we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic that it was so imperative that we partner with our suppliers. And we had to really understand the supply chain challenges in which they faced, because that would have affected our services and our suppliers. So we found that it is critical to understand our critical suppliers, the data that they are providing us, and any supply chain risks that they may have. And so you're absolutely right. It is critical that we understand the supply chain risk.
And finally, does your office conduct information security audits of the enterprise products, such as the new EHRM, the DMLSS, or the FMBT, before or as they are incorporated into VA systems?
Sir, would you please repeat that question?
Yes. Does your office conduct information security audits of enterprise products, such as the new electronic medical records modernization, the DMLSS, or the FMBT, before or as they are incorporated into VA system?
So from an OIT perspective, I would request that we take that for the record. Specifically, my Office of Strategic Sourcing within OIT does not do those types of audits.
Okay, I thank you. I yield back the rest of my time. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Rosendale for his final questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jaikaran, because SolarWinds was a trusted vendor, the hack would not have been caught by traditional prevention tactics. How did other agencies respond, and what lessons can we take away about the disaster recovery?
Thank you for the question, sir. So when I speak to the Department of Homeland Security and to other agencies, it appears that most agencies did adhere to the guidance that the Department of Homeland Security released, specifically CISA, in terms of taking action to remove potentially compromised SolarWinds Orion platform and waiting to bring those back online after DHS was confident that the vendor patched the vulnerability. Once those were brought online, agencies were then advised to segment their Orion instances. So if they were using Orion to monitor their cloud services, those should be different than those used to monitor on-premises services. Agencies also had automated tools released by Microsoft and Homeland Security to do automated searching for indicators of compromise to the Sunburst malware. So in that sense, many agencies followed the same procedures. To go one step beyond that, agencies could engage in a more sophisticated activity of actively threat hunting against the adversary. In this case, it was attributed to be the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Not just looking for indicators of compromise related to the Sunburst malware and the SolarWinds compromise, but other indicators of sophisticated actor capability taking action on their networks in an unauthorized manner.
So again, as we look forward, what lessons can we pick up from this as far as, I mean, we're doing the audits, I get that, but what could we glean from this to say, okay, here's what we could specifically do better to either identify this, keep it from happening, or address it better in the future?
Thank you, sir. So there has been some work at the Department of Commerce, particularly the NTIA, has looked at developing something called an SBOM, or software bill of materials, where vendors would have to disclose to their buyers what code was put into their product, so that, and attest to any vulnerabilities that may come inherent to that product. So that's one step that we can drive government vendors to be transparent with government agencies about what they're purchasing and the processes under which those products were developed. Additionally, I speak to this in my testimony that we can assume that not all products will be secure 100% of the time, and to try to do things to make it more difficult for adversaries to take advantage of federal networks, either by inhibiting their ability to get in at all, and once they're in, inhibiting their ability to move about the network and escalate privileges and carry out their objectives. One way that the administration has proposed doing so is by implementing zero trust architecture, which could be a very heavy investment for agencies to shift toward a zero trust architecture, but it would have a benefit of inhibiting adversarial activity on agency networks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I would yield back again. Thank you.
At this time, this concludes our hearing. Would Ranking Member Rosendale like to add any closing remarks?
No, sir, Mr. Chair, just thank you all so much for all the information, and I appreciate you taking the time today to be with us.
Thank you, Ranking Member Rosendale. I would also like to thank the witnesses for their participation today. And I think we need to continue to examine this issue and to work together to address challenges and concerns in cybersecurity space. I hope this underscores that I believe that cybersecurity must be a guiding part of the department's technology modernization efforts. I look forward to continuing this conversation and hope that we begin to see some real progress in VA's efforts to address these long-standing problems. I think all members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials. This hearing is now adjourned. I thank you all very much.